The one person business model seems very attractive to you. The problem is that it obviously comes with this balancing act that you have to do. You need consistent lead flow and you need to be able to deliver on your client work. The issue is, as you do more marketing, you're going to get more inbound leads. And over time, what that's going to cause is your delivery to pretty much go up. As your delivery goes up, you're going to start slacking on the marketing. This happened to me a few months ago where I was putting out YouTube videos. I was trying to be consistent. I got a couple of inbound leads. I had to do some discovery work. And then all of a sudden, my marketing took an absolute nosedive. And so in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the old model I was considering before using AI agents so heavily, the lead engine that I have set up right now, and then my exact setup for kind of keeping this maintained and working through everything. So I'm just going to go through what works for me. If it's useful for you, then that's great. If it's not useful for you, you can maybe take a couple of pieces here and there, some tips and tricks to apply to your business that you're running right now. The old model really is what I call growth at all costs. It requires that you start scaling up in terms of building out an operations backend. So if you don't want to be the person doing all the work, you're going to need an executive assistant, someone to manage your calendar, your bookings. You're going to need some type of account manager who's going to do the client conversations back and forth, letting the client know like the progress of different projects. You're probably going to need to partner with a few agencies unless you want to do everything in-house. Maybe you have another agency that handles graphics, designs, web logos, and things like that. Freelancers is another one. You might have to do some in-house freelancers or contract. Usually it's on a contract to contract basis. You're going to need some type of marketing team. So someone to keep up with social media. Even just the scheduling of it can help you free up a couple hours a week. And then you want to start setting up closers and setters. I was on this path. I was like, you know what? I just need to get all these people in line, because if I try to do all this myself and do the delivery, it's not going to work out. And for this to make sense, I would have to sell 3 to 5K packages, because it wouldn't make sense otherwise. It would just be way too low of a margin. I was going to be stuck managing people 24/7 basically. And when you really look at it, you're building the back office operations for people. Either you're doing a AI automation agency, web dev agency, design agency. They're all pretty much the same. The client doesn't have the operations to do what you're doing. So they're basically coming to you and your team to get it done. So not only do you have to build out their operations, they usually don't have SOPs or any processes in place. You still have other work to do for other businesses. And so you end up in this space where you're like building everyone's operations and your own operations are an absolute mess. I think there's a new model happening right now where smaller, talent dense teams are just outperforming bigger teams. And yes, I could have built this entire team right here, but overall, what I'm seeing is like talent dense technical teams are operating with all of this here. They're able to do a lot more when they have just a really good product and people coming mostly inbound to them. So there's a lot of things that can work in this space, but let's actually just take a look at some of these teams here. This is a link I found on Twitter, and it's a leaderboard that goes over this road to a one-person billion-dollar company. Now, of course, we're exaggerating a little bit here, but the idea is you have smaller teams, they can get so much more done because of AI. And so the person who put this together said, I'm a repeat founder who's built a 100 million ARR startup the old fashioned way by hiring hundreds of people and raising hundreds of millions in VC funding. And now I'm building an AI. I'm building in AI, and many of us in Silicon Valley are now big believers in this idea Sam Altman put forward. So we are now confident we know how to build AGI, and we traditionally understood it. There will soon be a $1 billion person company. And that's a big, bold statement to make. If the numbers weren't starting to go in that direction, you'll see here that total revenue between all these companies is 2 billion. The average revenue per employee is about 3.5 million. Average evaluation per employee is 144 million. And then the average team size is 22 people. I know departments of 22 people that are not as effective as this. Hell, I've seen most companies have way more than 22 people not making anywhere near this type of revenue. Of course, the companies that you see here are heavy hitters. These are not like small time companies with just a couple of products here and there. They're building out really big products and really technical products as well. And so there's of course cursors at the top here. 20 people, about 5 million in revenue. They've received a ton of funding, obviously. Another one is 11 Labs. I was actually surprised this is only 50 people, and that product is used by almost everybody. Another one here is Lovable, which is really popular for AI coding. That's only 20 people, and they're making 17 million a year. And so the revenue per employee is about 850,000. They've received 22 million in funding. And Gamma, you've seen me use Gamma a ton on this channel. I love that tool. I actually had no idea they were on this list. 28 people, not a lot of people there. And then there's Chatbase, which I was an early customer of Chatbase. I'm a big fan of what they're doing. 11 people. Actually, no, when he started this, he was one person and he was making about, I think, a little bit under $1 million a year. And then there's Vappy, which is super popular with Go High Level and a lot of agencies who are doing like voice agents. That company is only 20 people. So what's happening now is that a lot of these companies that are spinning up in these startups, I think this trend is going to carry over into the services space. You don't have to be this like super tech company or anything, but with less people who have a good talent density, you're going to be able to build a business that does a lot more. And so that's why this trend towards one person makes sense, because you can see all of these valuations here. If you look at the valuation per employee, I think it's right here. That's what's basically driving up that one person $1 billion company. Now, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but be on the watch out for that. So overall, let's go into the next one. Let's look at what works for me. The hands-off lead engine. Let's start with the beating hearts of this lead engine. There's two places, right? One is the open core self-hosting, and then the other one is the video content. So open core self-hosting, this is where I just do all my building. And this is where I spend most of my deep work time. It's just building out these agents, making sure they work, and then pushing them into two different directions. The first one is the DIY done with you type agent work that I do. And that is mostly education and teaching around agents, trying to really make sure that people understand the ways I build this stuff. And if they want to reuse it for their own businesses, they can. And that information is made exclusively available to the low ticket paid community. And then I have the other side of this, which is hosted agents. So this is going directly to this SaaS. And I call it high ticket here because it's not just a simple under $100 a month subscription. And so with this higher ticket model here, it's more done for you agents. This is not a agent building platform. I just wouldn't be able to compete in that space. It's a headache. And so this is for more of the people who they might want to build agents, but they also just want something that just works out of the box. And that's fine too. I use a ton of software that just works out of the box as well. And what I was mentioning too is that video content is the second like core part that is like a driving force. Video content goes to channels. And right now, the main channel I have is YouTube. I've actually tried multiple channels. I've tried Twitter for years. I tried Blue Sky. I tried Instagram. None of those channels really hit for me because maybe my writing style doesn't resonate too much there. But what I would find is I would get a ton of like inbound traffic, but they weren't really buyers and they were just there for like memes and stuff. So I was all over the place back then. Now I've dialed it in. And whenever I post a video, what happens is I get leads that come to the community. Of course, you have to provide value here. You can't just like, hey, put a vlog up and think you can get leads. I provide value to the channels, and then I have inbound leads come to the community, and then inbound leads come to the SaaS. The interesting thing is the people who hit the community and the people who hit the SaaS, there's usually a very little overlap when they're coming from YouTube or any other channels. But I will have some people from the community go try out the SaaS because maybe they're looking at the done for you stuff and they're thinking, it's a little bit too much work to set it up myself. I just want to use the AI agents. Now, is this model making me $1 million a month? No, it is not. But it is allowing me to build something that I can work on a couple hours a day or a week and not have it take over my entire life. And so everyone benefits from the work I do here, but they can basically use it in the way that makes sense for them. It's self-service. It doesn't require me to onboard anybody. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to really get into the app. And what happens is with this model is you get a couple ways you can tweak it to work for you. Who is your ICP? Who are you serving? What problems can you solve self-serve? So it has to be self-service problems with agents. I think the good price point here is between $200 and $700 a year. So you can split this up quarterly. I don't recommend going below that. It just doesn't become profitable at that point. And you have to know what channels work for you. For me, it took me a couple tries to figure out which channels worked. I tried Twitter. I tried the other ones. Didn't really work. X, sorry. And then, so YouTube ended up working for me. And then you have to decide what will you open source and share for free. There's nothing here that works if you just try to gatekeep all of the content, gatekeep everything. I open sourced my entire SaaS application and I found that it's not a problem because most people don't want to spin up your SaaS application. If you look at a tool like NAN, which is really popular right now, that's exactly their model. You can just take their product and self-host it if you want. They don't care. But they realize that the value is not in the code itself. The value is in that they're hosting it for you and making it available. And so if you're technical, this is a really good model to lean into right now. And one thing to be cautious of is you don't want this community to actually be big. You want this to be a smaller community. You want this to be people who are dialed in, because this shouldn't turn into a customer support fest. There should just be regular channels for customer support. This is really for the folks who are tied in to the business model and who want to deploy something, or they actually want to just learn how to do whatever you're pushing your open source stuff to. So let's say this is not agents. Maybe you're building a Stripe competitor and you're like, I know the perfect way to do payments, right? And so you're going to do your DIY version, your hosted version, and then attract people with video content. This model is working all over the place for a ton of people on YouTube. And so I just saw what was working out in the marketplace and then took advantage of that. Next, what we're going to do is just dive into actually how I set this up. And this is the stack right here. This stack is not crazy. I have a Second Brain hosted in Notion. This has all of like my strategy, my monetization plans, anything that's like top of mind, my contents in here. If I'm thinking through a framework or something, I can just ask Notion and get back a response. The other one is project management with Linear. And Linear helps me do something where I can calculate a burn down rate. And I'll actually jump into Linear here. And Linear, you'll see I have cycles. So right now I'm in a growth phase and I just went through a couple of different cycles where I was just launching things. So now I'm in a growth phase. My whole goal is to increase lead flow. Hence why I'm doing this video, to really focus in my ideas. And so overall, you can see here that the reason I like this is because it gives me a clear snapshot of if I'm increasing too much scope on myself during this growth phase here. And you can see right now, I'm doing it 134% over capacity. And I have 50 weekdays left to complete this work. And what I usually do is over time, I'll just add in things like during the week when I'm out and about, maybe I'm doing some client work here and there, and I don't have time to really think through something, I'll add an issue to this cycle. And what will happen is it'll bump up to a level where it's okay, there's a lot going on here, but you're not actually executing on these things. And so you'll see it happened last week where I narrow the scope down really well, and then I actually can get some work done. And over time, what happens is the scope goes back up. I'm going to have to pull it back down and then actually execute. And so this little dotted line here basically shows if I kept up with a very basic trend, if I would get all the work done by the time this cycle ends. And this is how I recommend people also build SaaS products. When you join my paid community, I have a little mini course on the different cycles you want to do when you're building out your SaaS product. I probably will have another course following up that goes over these type of cycles when you're building out like the lead gen for it. And so this is what I use Linear for. And if we go back here, I have Cursor, which is basically my AI co-founder. And an interesting use case I want to talk through today is when I was trying to figure out if MCP would work with Cursor. So if I go back up here, I'm going to go in my conversation history. We're going to go back to the top. I was trying to write some Cursor rules. Okay, and so I had this thing where I was talking about what would be the strategy for creating an MCP server for this code base, and like would I implement it in my API? And the reason I wanted to do that is I actually was still like reading through the protocol. I wasn't getting it. I had read through this about 6 months ago, this protocol. And at the time I made the decision, it's not widely adopted. I don't really see the point in doing this. It's like HTTP, so I'm not going to dive into it too much. And I decided to just ignore it for the time being. And so it's gotten popular again in true fashion, just like DeepSeek, where like something got released a few months ago and then all of a sudden it's really popular like 6 months later. It's just a new crop of people finding out about it, which is cool. I can't say that's not cool. All right, and so what I asked here is just basically, hey, I outsourced my thinking to Cursor a little bit on this one. So what I did is I just took the documentation for MCP and I took my code base and then I let it do its thing and I asked questions towards it. I asked questions. And so it went through, gave me some examples and gave me some ideas. And I realized I didn't really understand all of it. So I modified the prompt a little bit. And here you can see again, I ask it to, hey, explain to me if it's the correct way to think about it. And I asked it explicitly about HTTP request and whether or not I would need to actually use the MCP via SSE or STDIO or standard in. Then it goes through, it gives me a quick breakdown of that. And the thing I like about Cursor is it's getting better at understanding the code base. And so you've probably seen this in a lot of my other videos where I talk through my actual architecture and my backend. There should be a video here, the exact system I use on the AWS side, but I won't go through that again. And so it goes through and it says, okay, you're using API gateway, you're using lambdas, using queues. You would actually have to have this middle layer here to make MCP work. And for me, that kind of looks like a little bit, I'm just adding in stuff just to add in stuff. So I didn't really see the point. The follow-up question I had then was here, what are the actual use cases? I think whenever I'm struggling with something, I like to think about the actual use cases. Whenever I'm struggling with something, I think about the use cases. What's the point of actually implementing this? And the use cases it came up with was agent orchestration and communication. And basically, I have a lot of that done in this repo already. So not a big use case for me. Real-time delivery, status updates, actually a good use case. And then the third was what? Multi-agent collaboration, which I have down already. All right. And then the final question I asked was, would implementing MCP give me a new set of capabilities I don't have in this code base? That was actually the best question I could ask because it gave me a straightforward answer, the answer I was looking for, which was no. No significant new capabilities. And that's how I evaluated it. If you don't know what MCP is basically a new protocol. There's a ton of protocols. If you haven't seen the OSI layer, I would look that up. But there's a ton of protocols you can have and ways to communicate with machines, basically. And so there's HTTP, which is the most common one. That's the one you use for your browser. There's TCP, there's UDP. And so all these protocols really facilitate communication in a very standard way, and it's helpful for different types of data that you're transferring back and forth. So MCP is fairly new in this world of protocols, hence why it's not super mature. But most protocols, you can interplay with them a little bit instead of trying to always implement every protocol. So HTTP has won out as the most dominant protocol because it's one of the easiest ones to work with. And when I went to Cursor and I asked, would you recommend I do this for my code base? I actually got no, not recommended. Now that's because of how I have things set up. You might want to ask your code base, should I implement the MCP server? Would it make sense? I think it makes sense when you have a more established product and you want to just drive discovery on these servers, but I don't see everyday common people implementing MCP servers. So I have it implemented here for Linear, which makes sense. Linear is a big product. They're tightly integrated into the developer world. I see why they would create an MCP server here. And the interesting thing is I can go to Linear. Let me go to Linear. And I can get one of these issues that I have. So I'm thinking of building a video consulting agent with Tavis. And so what I'll do is I'll grab the link for this. What I'll do is I'll grab the link for this ticket. And I just paste in the Linear link here. It'll go ahead and you'll see it's actually looking up Linear. It's reading that link. And then it's going to go through a process to do the setup. I have another little prompt in here that tells it, give me a step-by-step plan before you do anything. And, oh, it actually didn't call Linear. Maybe I need to do the agent mode. Okay, actually, let me go back up here. Let's do agent mode instead. All right. And so what it should do is read the ticket from Linear and MCP server. And this is the problem with MCP tools, right? There's a little couple gotchas here and there. You can see it's reading Linear. It's getting the required parameters. It's initiating a connection. And it's telling me, oh, you need to actually authenticate Linear. So I'm going to go ahead and authenticate Linear. I got to open up this URL. Go here. All right, authentication successful. And then I'll have to actually just try this again because now it's authenticated. It should be able to read through the URL. So we'll wait for that. Okay, so we have great. See here, it says great. There's an active connection to Linear, and I'll get the details for you. It's searching the web, which is good. And all I did was give it a link really in the linear ticket. You could see a world where I really take my time to write out the specification I want to create this video consultant agent and have the protocol I want to use. I can have the exact libraries, my patterns defined. I could spend some more time defining cursor rules. You can really extend it pretty far. And I'm also using Claude 3.7 thinking to do this, so it's going to operate a little bit slower. Okay, so we have it go here. It's listing the directories. It's taking a look through everything. And it's going to probably take a minute. We'll see when it's done. Okay, it just wrapped up. And so it came up with a cool little plan here, which is great. I have, again, a prompt that stops this agent from just going off and coding things. It's a really good prompt. Let me actually show it to you. And I'll put it in the description for the paid community. Let's go into, where is it? Rules here. Very simple. Always explain what you're about to do in a step-by-step plan. You do not need to include code snippets, but just a numbered list. You can do additional thinking. Just present the file list of actions. I don't know why I added in that last part, but it works. And here, what happens in my setup here, for me to add a new agent to my backend, I just need to include a schema and create some of the required formatting and deliverable structure for it. And basically everything else is handled as long as I follow a certain structure of implementing the agent. So that's why it's able to give me this really detailed plan. The second step would be implement the runtime. It's going to create the primary adapters, register the agent, implement some type of testing, and then do another register the agent step, I think, but there's two places it needs to register the agent, which makes sense to me. The order of this is off, but it technically would work. I would just have to iterate on this. I'm not gonna go through that in this video. I think you've seen enough videos where people are like, I'm gonna one-shot cursor stuff. It's like, okay, that's cool, but you always have to debug afterwards. So I'm not gonna waste your time with that. All right, so let's get back into the list here. All right. And then, okay, next up is actually the community. So like I mentioned before, I do have a paid community. That's where I put my like step-by-step courses. And so these step-by-step courses are more evergreen in terms of I can swap out steps that change over time. If I put a bunch of step-by-step stuff on YouTube, literally next week it will be out of date. Like all that stuff I just showed you with linear and cursor, and it's probably going to change by the time you watch this video. And so I'll have a complete course inside of my paid community that goes over how I use cursor step by step, how I set it up, and when updates come out, I update it there. And then for my intern web developer, I showed you a little bit of that, which is linear, agent mode, and MCP. So what I'm going to start doing is really defining out what I want done. I used to do this with Devin. I actually ended up canceling Devin. It was just a lot more work than just using cursor, to be honest. And so this is a feature I liked about Devin was you can just give it a URL and say, hey, look at this GitHub issue, start working on it. And so now I'm going to basically replace that and say, hey, look at this linear issue cursor and start working on it with agent mode, and then go get myself a coffee somewhere. All right, for my actual SaaS product, I just use Clerk, Unkey, Stripe, SST, and AWS. Clerk is basically just for authentication, authorization. Unkey is for API key management and credit management. Stripe is for payments, of course, and then SST is for all the infrastructure automation that I can do using AWS. If I didn't have SST and AWS, this list would be so much longer because there are so many products that would need to be involved. What I found is over time, I used to use things like Supabase, I tried Convex, I tried all these different tools. Encore is another one, but I would have to keep logging in and out of their dashboards. Now, Clerk, Unkey, and Stripe, I'm okay with because those are critical infrastructure components that I don't want to write myself. Everything else though, like if it's just a database, I don't want to have to keep logging in and out of a dashboard for a database. I also don't want to keep logging in and out of a dashboard for queues or anything like that. So I just use SST and AWS to set all that stuff up. And then the last piece is actually what I'm using right now to record this video, which is Descript. And Descript allows me to go through, record my video. I get an automatic transcript. I can also do some AI touch-ups, and it's easy to do editing. I can add in B-roll here and there. I got some people don't like the B-roll. I like the B-roll, so maybe I need to record more of my own B-roll. And what I do as well is I don't really, and so the other part of this system is basically some miscellaneous tools I'm not mentioning here, but these are the main tools that I use to set up this entire system. So this is a system I'm setting up here, and then this is the tech stack that enables me to set that up as one person. Okay, so the idea is you do need to create systems. I actually have a lot of this documented out in SOPs and things, but I tend to be more of a a SOP type person, so I'll write all those. I have 0 employees to manage this. I have no one to manage, and that's the goal. This is very much a lifestyle thing, right? If I was going for big growth and I want to raise a bunch of venture capital and I want to start the next billion-dollar company, I want to change the world, this wouldn't be able to do it. You just wouldn't be able to support that the infrastructure required. But this is basically just for me. I enjoy this business. I enjoy working with agents. I enjoy doing the education on it. I enjoy talking about business models and things. So this is just a little bit of fun for me, which means that I don't have to have employees. I have no one to manage. I also don't have sales calls, cold email, or cold outreach. I I get tons of inbound opportunities basically. And people are coming to me with projects around, hey, we need, so people are coming to me, they have projects which are like custom web development, right? Custom web development. I've been offered around like 10K plus to do custom web development for people, which means building out their like SaaS platform or whatever it is, which is actually low because it's a ton of work. I've been offered brand deals, and I've actually turned most of them away because they're not a good fit for the channel. But I encourage you, if you still want to sponsor things, just reach out. And then I've also been offered roles like CTO or strategic advisor roles, which could be like fractional CEOs, CTOs, things like that. So I'll put advisor here. And I did get into some of these conversations, but again, a lot of discovery work here. And I would have to charge just a crazy amount to make it worth my time. So whatever that opportunity is, I've turned that away because I want to focus on something that is not as delivery heavy. So this is very delivery heavy work. And when I have my system here that's set up like this, so I'm going to go back to let's go back here. This system is more, I would say, input heavy. So I do have to put a lot more into the system to make it work, but once it gets going, it pretty much runs on its own. All I need to do is make sure I'm putting in video content, make sure I'm doing some type of development work. And over time, the video content, I might even replace this with like influencers, or partner with someone who's on the same wavelength. Maybe they want to do a couple videos on the channel, things like that. So this is pretty much what's called a flywheel. You may have heard of this concept before. It's very popular. So this is a flywheel model. That means it might be slow to start. It might be slow to start, but once it gets going, it starts basically running itself instead of you constantly having to put a lot more into it. Over time, my input's going to go down. And so right now my input's going up, but then over time at some point it's just going to nosedive out, but the system will still continue to grow like that. All right, so overall, that's my model. This video did go on a bit long, but as a one-person business, I know people have been asking me these questions. Like, what are you doing? Like, how are you setting all this stuff up? This is pretty much it. I think this is not complicated. Any creator you follow who's like technical right now is probably doing some version of this. I see some people have a free group that goes right here. Some people are doing, instead of like DIY stuff, they don't do the DIY, they don't do hosted work, they just send people up to one-on-one work. So it's variable. You can do what you want, right? You can also get rid of the SaaS. You can turn this into a micro tool for the community, right? That goes to the community. There's a bunch of ways you can tweak this, but for me, this is what I've been using and what's working. So hopefully that was helpful for you if you're thinking about how to structure yourself moving forward, and you're like, hi, I have to build a big team. I have to hire all these people. You don't, but with the trade-off of you do have to charge a little bit lower. I wouldn't say once you start having a team, you have to charge more because your margins won't make sense. But if you're just by yourself, you can charge a pretty decent price point a year. It's on you to do your marketing. It's on you to drive the value and make sure you're giving that value to your potential clients and your potential leads. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. If you are still around, there's a video right here that's probably a best fit for you.